Source Nation. Join us now for Family Mix Mondays with licensed professional counselor Jaketra Bryant. Tune in as Jaketra shows the different dynamics that make up family. Whether you represent the nuclear family, single parent, extended, grandparent, or blended family, Jaketra has tips and advice designed to strengthen your family structure. Source Nation, here is your host, Jaketra Bryant.
Good evening, Source Nation. I am your host, Jaketra Bryant, and I want to welcome you to Family Mix Mondays. I am so excited about tonight and just so excited about this series. And so if you've been tuning in, which I hope you have, and you brought a friend or another family member, then you'll know our series is on engaging fathers in parenting. We definitely need to have this discussion. And so tonight, as I've already been really just having some awesome guests, just shine some light on what it looks like if fathers are absent or some different factors. I just want to start off by just letting you know the seriousness of co-parenting. I don't want to create where I'm saying that a person needs to be where it's like, okay, we need a husband and a wife. I'm just discussing the necessity of co-parenting and the role that parents play. And as we discuss engaging fathers in parenting, and tonight we have a great guest who is going to shine some light from the male perspective as a father, as a person who has fought hard, and his story. And it's definitely going to be a good one. And some of the things that I was reading in Huffington Post and where research has been done across the United States talks about some particular reasons that fathers might be absent. And so a lot of times I think our thoughts go to incarceration, it goes to drugs, or it goes to a death. And then immediately when that happens, we go to a certain culture, unfortunately. Let's be real. But there are lots of other factors. Sometimes there are relationships that don't work out and the marriage or the relationship ends. And that actually puts the fathers at a very hard place. Court systems, based on whatever state you're in, favors more mother than it is for a father to come in and actually state why they feel like they're a good fit or a better fit. And so it's really, there's just so many factors that are involved. And I just want, as we create this platform of engaging fathers, I want us to hear all sides of it because I want us to find some solutions so that co-parenting can take a place and it becomes the norm. It's okay if your marriage didn't work. It's okay if your relationship didn't work, but co-parenting is another form of relationship. And those absent fathers or absent mothers create a whole nother beast that goes on in our cities and our states, from hatred to dropouts to substance abuse to severe mental health issues to transgenerational cycles continuing. And so we have this great guest, Mark Ludwig, who is going to shine some light on engaging fathers in parenting. And so let me just stop and just thank our sponsors, and I am just ready for this discussion. And so our sponsors are Zelina Health, Wellness, and Fitness, Paper to Film Productions, Revolution Meals, Renovations, Meet My Types Matchmaking, Blend to Blend Juice Bar Boutique, and Urban Grandstand Digital and New Covenant Praise Worship Center. And after the break, we're going to have Mark Ludwig, and it's just going to be really good. It's going to be really good. So stay tuned, and he'll be right with us.
Source Nation, stay tuned. You're listening live to Family Mix Mondays with your host, Jaketra Bryant. Source
Source Radio Network is just one of the many platforms that is used to fulfill dreams of our listeners and create a purpose that will impact the lives of our communities, cities, and the world. It is often said that great things will happen when a group of driven people work together to accomplish one goal. We're giving people the opportunity to have a voice, translate words that haven't been heard, and paint pictures that no one has seen. Source Radio Network is fueling your life's purpose. How can you listen? www.blogtalkradio.com/Source Radio.
Sure, humans can be a little weird at times, but take it from me, I'm a dog. And a person is about the best thing that can happen to a shelter pet. So if you want to learn how you can be that person, get down to your local pet shelter or visit theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back, Source Nation. You're listening live to Family Mix Mondays with your host, Jaketra Bryant.
Welcome back, Source Nation. You're listening live to Family Mix Mondays, and I'm your host, Jaketra Bryant. And we are continuing our series of engaging fathers in parenting. And I so want to apologize for saying my guest name incorrectly, because I don't like when people say my name incorrectly, so I know I still apologize. But our guest is Mark Ludwig, and extensive resume, so I'm only going to give you a clip of it because, he's just amazing. So he started In Case I'm Not Here, which is Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. He's also a National Legislative Liaison Director of the Fathers' Rights Movement with over 425,000 members and founder of Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. Also former board of directors of South County Chamber of Commerce, speaker at 2017 Million Parent March in D.C., and so many other things that he's done. And so I'm going to let him tell you so much more because he is an awesome advocate for the community of fathers. And so I do believe we have Mr. Mark in the studio. So good evening, Mark, and thank you so much for joining me on Family Mix Mondays. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Jaketra.
Thank you so much. I apologize for messing up your last name.
That's okay. I answered anything as long as it's clean.
Thank you for being understanding. Thank you so much for understanding. So I thank you again for being on here. This is a much-needed topic, and so I thank you for being bold. I thank you for being just an advocate and a voice that we get here tonight. And so before we jump into our discussion, if you can just tell Source Nation a little bit more about you and any new things you have going on you want us to just jump right in and get involved in.
Sure. Well, first off, I really do greatly appreciate you spending the time to cover this topic. It's a topic that really does, as you said, need to be covered. There's so many, and it affects both genders. So a lot of times, since my own background, obviously I come into it as a father, but there are mothers who go through the same situation too. So I don't mean to offend any mothers who say, hey, I'm going through the same type of situation. But myself, if someone 8 years ago had told me a father wasn't involved, I would have thought, he's probably a deadbeat dad, probably more to the story that we don't know about. And I was sort of thrust into the situation about 7.5 years ago where my son's mother and I weren't married at the time. And I soon found out that in the state of Missouri, without your name on the birth certificate, you don't have any rights. And even if your name was on the birth certificate, you still didn't have, especially at that time, a lot of rights as a father. And let me clarify too that I love my son to pieces, and so I really sincerely believe that he has a right to love both his mother and his father. So as I go through my story, I want to make sure that people understand. I'm trying to cover it in a general sense that it would not de-edify my son's mother, because we all of us make mistakes, myself included. But just so that people understand. Shortly after he was born, I did go 204 days without seeing him, and then spent another year of a court battle to wind up with basically 6 overnights a month, which If a kid went to school 6 overnights a month, they wouldn't pass on to the next grade. If a person had a job and went to work 6 days a month, they'd be fired. And yet I'm supposed to be a father to my own son on 6 nights a month. That's not enough time to build that bonding relationship. And the sad part is it was a graduated plan. So the first few years I didn't even get that. Matter of fact, in my trial, the guardian ad litem quoted what's known as the tender years doctrine, which isn't even supposed to be used in Missouri, but claiming that basically a child is better off with an infant is in all cases better off with a mother. And yes, in many cases that's so, but more and more studies have shown that bonding within the first 2 years with a father is just as critical for a child. And so I started getting more involved, and as my story became known, I was amazed at how many calls I started getting from fathers saying, hey, I went through the same thing. And I was just amazed at this epidemic across the country that I had always been raised to believe that, as I said, it was deadbeat dads. And there are a lot of deadbeat dads out there. I won't deny that at all. Unfortunately, I think the government tried to impose some safeguards in the system that unfortunately went a little bit too far. And I think it swung the pendulum the other direction to where there's a lot of good, fit, willing, and able fathers who want desperately to be fathers to their children, but they're forced into a system where they're pushed to the side and relegated to basically visitors on Wednesday nights and every other weekend. And so what I've been really working hard with a lot of good people, and I mean just some really good people across the country that are all dedicated to, if two parents are both fit, willing, and able, that child should have equal access to both of those parents.
I think it's really interesting that you actually say about the 6 nights a month, or just the fight that you had to go through with the court system. As I was just having the idea of this series and searching around for different guests, I remember having a conversation with someone saying, I want a single dad who is involved. And I found this young man who'll be on later, and he actually has won sole physical custody of his child. And as I was telling somebody that, they were like, how did he get that? What did he do to get that? What's wrong with the mom? And so it immediately went to this whole thought that something must be wrong with the mom. And I've been guilty of that thought process as well in the past. And what was so great about him that he won that? And so I'm really eager to hear your journey and your story, because I think we have to break past the mindset of that, and not only in regular people but also in legislation and Congress and just court systems.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the word win, that he won, full custody, and unfortunately that's sort of what the courts have put us in, is an adversarial relationship where the parents are basically fighting amongst each other, and it's almost who comes out the winner. And in my mind, it shouldn't be about the parents. It should always be about that child. Now, as I said, if there's cases of abuse or neglect, that definitely should be addressed. But barring cases of abuse or neglect, in my mind, I want my child, as much as obviously I have some serious disagreements with his mother, I still remember as a kid, my first two heroes were my mom and dad. And I want my kid to have that same chance to be able to love his mom. I don't ever want him to feel guilty about expressing how much he loves his mom. And so that's why I said, in my mind, it should be a gender neutral, that every child, as long as the parents are fit, willing, and able, and if a parent walks out or a parent moves away and wants nothing to do with a child, that's very different. But if two parents both want to be involved, that child should have equal access to both of them.
I agree. And so, Mark, I want to know, how did In Case I'm Not Here get started? So what's the story behind that inspired you to begin your book of In Case I'm Not Here? That's soon to be coming out, right?
Yeah, it's going to be coming out later in the late fall, early winter. But I had started working on legislation. I had gone through a pretty serious medical challenge shortly after the trial. I was diagnosed, and sorry, it's going to be a little hard to talk about, so I apologize, but was diagnosed with an inoperable brain cyst shortly after the trial. And things took quite a little turn for me. I started having some problems speaking. I was stuttering. I was slurring, semi-similar to a stroke victim at times, especially when I got fatigued. The cyst is in the pineal gland, which controls the melatonin supply. And so I don't even know how to describe it, but imagine if somebody drank a bottle of Tylenol, how tired they would be. That's sort of what would happen to me, is all of a sudden just massive amounts of melatonin would be released, and there was no gutting it up. I would be in bed for 18 hours, and there was no energy. I mean, if I had to go to the bathroom too bad, I would have wet myself. And so there was a time where it started getting pretty bad. I believe I got a miracle healing back in December of 2014. The cyst is still in my body, and it's still pretty large in my brain. But for whatever reason, I'm highly functioning right now, although some people may question that. Mm-hmm. But I had been involved in politics for years and finally decided, well, why don't I start putting some of my political connections to work, and was very, very blessed in Missouri. We have a team of people that had already been working on a bill, a great group of people, Jeremy, Linda, and Kenneth, and I just think the world of the three of them, and now we've added another one, Scott Smith, into the mix. But these guys had already been working on it. They just didn't have the connections. And so I was a small piece of the puzzle. I think I tend to get a little bit more notoriety because I've got some media connections. But I'll tell you what, the three of those guys just worked unbelievably hard. We were able to get a bill passed in the state of Missouri a year ago that just went into effect literally a year ago this month. Which swung the pendulum quite a bit in the state of Missouri. It was sort of the shot heard around the world, or around the country, I guess, if you will. It's probably the most significant piece of family law legislation passed in years. And a lot of people have been talking to me about, it's kind of neat that you went through a custody battle, you had all the medical challenges, and you were part of a small team that got that bill passed. You ought to write a book, and that would get you on, interviews more often. And I had hesitated to do that because I didn't want to write a he said, she said book. I didn't want to write a book at all dealing with the custody, my personal custody situation, because like I said, I don't want to write a book that someday my son's going to be old enough to read and feel like I was putting his mother down in a public sense. And but then I started a journal to him during the 204 days that I was without him right after he was born. Yeah, I'd heard all these horror stories of dads that had, the kids had grown up without knowing their dad, and come to find out years later that their dad had really wanted to be a part of their lives. And I thought, well, just in case I don't ever really see him, I'm going to start a journal, because I don't want him to ever wonder, did Dad love me? Was Dad wanting to be a part of my life? So every night before I went to bed, starting from the day he was born, I started a little journal letting him know how much I loved him, how much I thought about him during the day. Tried to never de-edify his mom, but I would convey the message that obviously he was I was without him, and what it was like to be laying in bed late at night staring at the ceiling and wondering if I'd ever see him again, what it would be like to be able to play ball with him when he got older. And then when I had the medical condition, there was a time where my doctor literally said, and asked me the question, do you have your affairs in order? And that was a time that really hit home for me, that what if I don't make it? And so I had started including some life lessons that I told my parents that in case I don't make it, I want you to read these life lessons. I've got them highlighted in the journal. I want you to read these to my son when he gets older. And it finally dawned on me, that's the book I can write then, the life lessons of if you were a parent and you didn't know for sure you were going to be around when your son was a teenager or junior high school, what are the life lessons that you want to leave behind as a legacy? So I started the book called In Case I'm Not Here, Life Lessons from a Father to His Son. And literally they're taken out of I've kept it up to this day. I now have 23 books with 200 pages per book of a journal that I've written to my son. He literally has every day of his life documented since the day he's been born, and then interspersed in there are these life lessons. So that's the book, is basically the life lessons that I'm leaving behind for him. And just different things about watch how people treat different people, especially like, one of the lessons goes through about watch how people treat waiters and waitresses and service people and doormen and people like that, the people that you'll never get anything directly from, but it's a good judgment of character of how somebody is. And so a few things like that I've put in there.
That's so amazing, Mark. My thoughts were just going, my wheels were just turning. I was like, oh my goodness, this is better than pictures. And so we often like to capture our pictures with our moments and with our cell phones. But I was thinking, man, how awesome is a book? A book to go back and say, like, things like I'm so glad you mentioned like about building your character and just those things that we really do overlook as parents or as what life lessons are. And it's truly a blessing. It's truly a miracle. And I'm with you. I'm going to give recognition where recognition is due.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And then my hope is to donate the proceeds to be able to help fathers across the country, two ways. Number one is helping to raise awareness and get statewide legislation passed, and then to help other fathers. Because of the medical situation, I went a couple of years where I wasn't able to work. And literally 3 years ago in December of 2014 at the worst point, I literally was sleeping in my condo in St. Louis and couldn't afford utilities. So there were nights it was below zero outside, and I was sleeping in my condo, but in a sleeping bag with 2 winter coats on because it was so cold because I couldn't afford the utilities. And there were many nights I literally ate food out of trash cans. And so there's a lot of times you think of the single mothers out there and not taking anything away from them. If there's mothers that, the fathers really have walked away, I do think they're going to need some help. But unfortunately, fathers are kind of overlooked. There's kind of a stigma in society that, well, if you're a man, just gut it up and take care of yourself. Well, if you've got a medical condition or something else happened, sometimes it's kind of hard to gut it up. You need a little bit of help. So I'm hoping to be able to donate some of the proceeds to help fathers that are in similar situations.
I think you're right. That's the best way to put it. It is very overlooked. As you know, as we discussed, I'm a mother of a 9-year-old, and I picked up several books from the bookshelf, What to Expect When Expecting, or Guides for Parenting, and it's one-sided. A lot of books that are written are very one-sided, and so I knew everything about what was going to happen with my body at every week and how to prepare. And so there's not too much literature out there that guides guys that actually want to get involved or that talk about parenting. And if it is talking about parenting, there's still a lot of one-sided discussion. So I appreciate just being able to hear another view, and as a woman, to hear from another man, like with that.
Yeah, and the other thing a lot of people aren't aware of is from a guy's perspective, you hear all these stories of, well, guys, they took a lower-paying job so they could get out of paying child support. And I'll just tell you, during that year and a half that I was in the middle of a custody battle, imagine if you're a father and you don't get time with your son during the trial, and you don't know if you're going to get time. You don't know, are you only going to get one overnight a week, or are you going to, one overnight a month? Are you ever going to get to see him? Imagine trying to focus on your job at that point. And, for people that are married or have full-time access to their kids, I give the analogy, imagine the first time your kid went away to camp, how bad you missed them. And they were all, imagine having your child taken away and now having to go through a custody battle. It's hard to keep your job when you can't focus at work anymore. So I think the majority of fathers that people have that impression of, they didn't intentionally take a lower-paying job. A lot of them lost their jobs because they couldn't focus at work.
I agree. And I think you're right. People overlook those things. And so, Source Nation, I want to open up the phone lines for you to be a part of this awesome discussion. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Mark Ludwig, who is an awesome father who took a stand to get involved more with parental rights and just awesome. So if you would like to be a part of this discussion, the number to dial in is 619-924-0933. That's 619-924-0933, and press option 1. And so, Mark, I was wondering, what has been some of the benefits that you've came across, whether parental or just out in a community, since creating this sense of movement, if you will, and getting legislation involved?
I think first off, let me clarify. I wasn't the one who created it, because a lot of people give me so much credit and recognition, and I really do feel guilty because there's a lot of people that came before me that started the wheels in motion. But since my name has been out there, I think the most rewarding thing is getting out there. I'm not exaggerating. There's not a day that goes by that I don't get a private message or an email from a father saying, "Hey, thanks. You gave me hope." Especially there's a high rate of suicide with non-custodial fathers, and unfortunately some people try and put a stigma of mental illness with that, and to say maybe these fathers shouldn't have access to their kids in the first place. Then once again, imagine if a child is kidnapped. People think of, oh my gosh, those poor parents, what are they going through? Well, indirectly, it's not really a kidnapping, but if a child is gone from you and you don't know if you're ever going to see him again, it's amazing how you lose all sense of hope, after a while. And some of these fathers that I talk to, it's not just, they've gone without seeing their child for a month. Some of them have gone a couple of years of fighting a court battle with zero time at all with their child. And so as a result, there's a very, very high rate of suicide. And I think the neatest feeling in the world to me is when I get calls and messages from fathers saying, hey, thanks, you gave me hope to keep on fighting for my child.
And I think that's something that you mentioned that is something that we don't always assume. When we think of fathers, we absence or deadbeat or this negative kind of association. And so suicide, poverty, like really depression, just all these things that go overlooked that are happening when there are fathers that want to be involved. And so I'm glad you spoke to that. I'm glad you spoke to that. This was a time that it affected you mentally, physically, also.
And I think too, when you mention that, I'm from the St. Louis area, and so I've got a lot of direct connections to a lot of fathers from the inner city. And it's amazing how it affects them. And I believe, yes, there are a lot of deadbeat dads, as I said, that walk away. I'm not going to deny that. However, if somebody is a father in the inner city of any major city across America, even if a father wants to be involved, mentally in their mind, the deck's stacked against them. They don't have the money for an attorney. They know that most court cases, gear towards the mother anyway. And the best they can hope for is maybe I'll get to see my child a little bit of time, but I'm also going to be chased down for child support that's probably going to be at a higher level than I can afford. And so I think most fathers, they want to be involved, but their attitude is, if I try, I'm just going to get hit from both sides. So what they end up doing, they get chased away. And I think we need to come up with a new, right now the government comes after child support, and I do agree that a father should be financially responsible for their portion of a child. But I think we need to create incentives to incentivize fathers to stay involved, to reward the good dads, to say, hey, if you are involved, what can we do? What kind of resources? What kind of help can we give you? And give different resource centers to know, first off, what to do as a father. A lot of dads don't even know what to do with their kids. They don't realize that when a kid's young, you need to get on your knees and be on the floor playing with them to get that eye-to-eye contact with them, and just different resources like that. I'm thinking I wish we had more things like that for fathers to help encourage them to be involved rather than just say, hey, we're coming after you if you're not involved.
Yeah, I agree. So we have a caller calling in. So Mark, last four digits, 4982. So caller with the last four digits of 4982. You are live on Family Mix Mondays. Hello, thank you for calling. What's your question or comment for Mark?
Hello, good afternoon. Well, I just wanted to talk and call in about some aspect that Mark hit on. He specifically mentioned hope, and I think that's something. I'm a caller calling in from Missouri, the same state where this new law went into play, and it's something that I think is now out there to give not just dads. I think it's both moms and dads. It's parents in a situation where you've got another parent controlling things to say now, hey, you know what? There's now a law on the books. There is now hope. We have something in the state that says we can start to equalize the child's access to both parents.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Like I said, in the past, most fathers, they just felt like, man, this is going to be an uphill battle. I have no chance. The deck's stacked against me. And now I think it's getting closer to where it really needs to be, that, hey, it should be about the child. And that, fathers who want to be involved realize, hey, I've got a chance now. Rather than having to worry about it and sweat and stress about, gosh, I'm going to lose out on everything. Hey, I got a chance now to be a father of my child. And I think it's given a lot of fathers hope to step up even more and pursue more quality time with their kids. I think that's a great point.
I think so, and what it also allows too, and sorry, I should fully disclose, I'm actually an attorney and I practice here in Missouri, and so what I've seen, and when Mark mentioned that hope, what I've seen is the courts are now starting to warm up, and it's the law's been on the books for about a year now, and I'm seeing now it's about courts and judges are now about sort of 2/3 warming up to it, saying, hey, here's the law. The law pretty much now in Missouri, technically it's not a presumption of equal shared 50-50 custody, but it's the next closest thing. And what judges are essentially doing is if I don't enter a plan for 50-50, I need to come up with a pretty good reason why not. And what we're going to do now with this new law is we're going to start at 50-50, and if there's any reason that there shouldn't be 50-50 custody, like you mentioned earlier, a mental health issue or an addiction problem or something like that, then we can take into consideration those things. But we're starting at 50-50, and the reason that's important, I think, is that hope that we've talked about. Because before, when you're talking about, one night, only one night and every other weekend, that's like 6 nights a month. That's nothing. It didn't give anyone any hope. But now with this law and with these judges are warming up to it, saying, okay, now we start at 50-50 and we work our way back. So that's a positive change as well that I've seen starting to warm up in about 2/3 of courts I've been in.
I think that's a really a good start, and so I'm going to have to look into it to see if more states are coming to that, because I'm sure, just like Mark explained, it has a lot of negative effects, and people do. Like, I've never heard it put in the form that he put it, like you wouldn't go to work 6 days a month or you wouldn't do these 6 days for that. That was an awakened perspective even for me.
Yeah, and then
exactly.
Society's paying the price. When you look at the statistics, 90% of all homeless and runaway kids are from fatherless homes. 80% of rapists, came from fatherless homes. 71% of teen pregnancies came from fatherless homes. Over and over, all these statistics play out that we've got to get dads back involved in the homes again. So, and you did mention there are a lot of other states. Matter of fact, I'm involved, or last year was, at least keeping up with about 37 different pieces of legislation across the country. Kentucky came up with a great one this year. Not only affected temporary orders, it didn't affect permanent orders, but it did come up with a 50-50 rebuttal presumption that during the temporary part of a custody situation, children will have equal access to both parents. And they're going to be going back for a permanent bill next year. I know up in Michigan, Jim Runstead, the state rep from up in Michigan, has a bill that passed the House Judiciary Committee up in Michigan. It'll be coming up this fall for a vote on the House floor. But, yeah, one by one, states across the country are starting to make some changes.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Carl, for calling in, and we appreciate your insight, even from a professional standpoint. And so thank you for tuning in.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your call and I appreciate the program. Thanks so much. Bye now.
All right, thanks. So, callers, Source Nation, I want to remind you of the phone number. And so we are so willing to take questions and comments on this much-needed topic. So the number to dial in is 619-924-0933. That's 619-924-0933, and press option 1. And so, Mark, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So as we were talking, I was just thinking about a conversation I've had with one of my best friends, my son's godmother, and she has had lots of struggles with her son and his children and the particular rights that are often pulled away where they're mad at him, and so they're like, well, I'm mad, and so now you're not going to see the girls or you're not going to see your son. And so I was letting her know that I was like, I don't think he understands, like, his rights. And we're in Georgia, so legitimizing someone, or even like you were mentioning, even if you're on the birth certificate, then it really, doesn't matter if you haven't, if you don't have those rights. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that just some. So what do you think are some of the common, challenges that some of our fathers are having to face when they do want to have more time with their children?
Well, they say pretty much it's an uphill battle. Almost nationwide, the standard has been the Wednesday night and every other weekend. And as I said, that relegates people to visitor. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the, Jeremy Roberts, who was probably the biggest person that had the most to do with the legislation in Missouri. just has such a hard time with visitor as the term. It should be parenting time, not visiting time. You visit the grandparents, you visit an uncle, you visit a friend. You don't visit your own father. And yet, if you look at almost every piece of parenting legislation in the country, the term for the non-custodial parent is visitor and visiting time. And I think that's one discussion that we need to have with all the legislatures across the country is that is not visitor time. That is parenting time. And as a result of the term visitor, that's the way it's perceived. And that's the way most dads feel is they're relegated to being a visitor.
And so, Mark, we have a caller in the queue. And so, caller with the last four digits of 3665, you're listening live to Family Mix Mondays. What's your comment or question for Mark?
Hi, Mark. I just wanted to start out by thanking you for taking the initiative to really be dedicated for this cause. I'm a grandmother, and I didn't know at all what fathers faced going into court to see their child if the mother doesn't want them to. And I think that the general public, unless they have first-hand experience or have suffered through this themselves, have no idea what it's like for a father who truly does want to be in their child's life. And it's not just the father, it's the whole father's side of the family, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles. They can not have anything to do with this child if the one parent, the custodial parent, doesn't want them to. So I'm amazed that it can cost $20,000 just to get that every other weekend. And that's what it cost me. And I am from Michigan, and one thing I just don't understand right now is I know that the law changed in Kentucky, and it went through the committee, it went through the House, it went through the Senate unanimously with no opposition. And Michigan is fighting tooth and nail. There's so much opposition, which is mostly from the attorneys and the judges, which in my opinion is strictly financial, has nothing to do with the best interest of the child. I don't see any logic in denying a father who wants to be a father to their child, not a visitor, like you said. How long do you think it will be before this shared parenting really takes hold across the country?
Well, thanks for your call. A couple thoughts come to mind, and the first is when you mentioned about being a grandmother. I mean, that a lot of people picture it's just the dad, but like you said, it's that whole side of the family. As a matter of fact, the Father's Rights Movement that has the 425,000 members across the country, almost 40% of those followers are now women. They're either grandmothers, they're sisters, they're aunts, they're the new spouse of the father that are now realizing what's going on here. And as you said, children are being denied not just access to the father, but that whole other side of the family that's a part of their DNA. So I think it's a good point to bring up. Another point is the Bar Association, which is really the only opposition. People always say, what's the opposition to us? The primary opposition nationwide is the Bar Association. And they're out to protect their members. I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing. I disagree with it, but I understand where they're coming from. Just like unions are there to protect their members, the Bar Association to protect their members. And as you mentioned, family law is a $50 billion a year industry. So if attorneys can keep people fighting in court and keep that adversarial relationship, the longer they can draw that court battle out, the more billable hours there are. And that's why attorneys are so opposed to this. If there was a rebuttable presumption that both parents are equal, I can almost guarantee you almost overnight the billable hours for family law across the country would be cut by probably 70%. And so they're fighting this tooth and nail. As a result, it's going to take some time. I think Missouri is probably the closest to passing a true 50-50 rebuttable presumption. I think it's going to happen next year. I think right behind them is going to be Kentucky. I think your state of Michigan, you just have a dynamite champion with this Jim Runstead, who's the chair of the Judiciary Committee. Unfortunately, he's got a few of his colleagues that don't understand. But there is,
Right.
state by state, we're starting to get more progress. I think it's going to be a 3 to 5 year process. So unfortunately, a lot of people say, well, why can't we get a bill passed this year? Well, I've been involved in politics and legislation for 30 years, and it takes time. Very rarely are you going to get a bill through the first time that you try. It's about a 3 to 5 to 7 year process. And I think we've got the ball rolling now, so I think within 3 to 5 years we're going to see a bunch of these 50-50 bills passed across the country.
Well, I think that would be a wonderful thing, not only for the parents who want to be in their children's lives, but the children. The statistics are clear, and the studies are clear. I've been researching this lately, and it's clear that it is best for the kids to have that parental relationship with both parents. And the way the courts are right now, I was just shocked to see how hard you have to fight and how many fathers are called deadbeat dads, but nobody knows the obstacles that they face on the court. So, yeah, I want to thank you for pushing this through and for educating people, and I think that it would be a better world if we could get this passed in Michigan, for sure. But
I was going to say, good luck to you guys up in Michigan. You're doing dynamite up there.
Well, we're giving it a good shot. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for calling in. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. So, Mark, definitely thank you for your work and being brave again for just this topic. And it sounds like not just Missouri, but Georgia to Florida to like so many states are being affected. And I think I speak for a percentage of people where I'm, like I said, in the past, I'm very guilty of having a one-sided thought process of, why a dad isn't present. And I've had to humble myself, even going through as a single mother, to really look at what co-parenting looks like and the necessity. And I don't doubt that anyone's role or presence isn't needed.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, too. People always ask me that with the legislative process of, why can't we get this thing changed? And I think that because in order to make change, you're going to have to convince people who don't understand where you're coming from. So before we can try and push our thoughts on someone else, we need to try and find out where are they coming from and how can we educate them. Just as I said, 8 years ago, I would have thought, he's probably a deadbeat dad. Until, unfortunately, my education came by being thrust in the situation by myself. But for legislators out there who aren't aware of that, we've got to meet them where they are, not protest, not fight with them, not say that, they're horrible because they're legislators and haven't passed a bill. They don't understand the thing yet. So what we need to do is build a relationship with these legislators to educate them on the situation. And that's what I've tried to understand. As I said at the beginning, it really is gender neutral. Obviously I come about it from my perspective. Like you said, you came to your perspective. I always come at it from a man's role, but I've been approached by many, many women across the country who said, hey, I've been fighting to get access to my kids. My ex-husband was a multimillionaire. I didn't have any money. I haven't seen my kids in over a year because I don't have the attorney. So I really try to put myself in other people's shoes to try and understand where they're coming from. Sort of like Stephen Covey says, seek to understand before being understood.
That's a really good point because, I remember reading articles years ago about Usher Raymond or I think Halle Berry's children are given primarily to the father. And so conversations of gossip just kind of spread across where we're just like, it's because this was Usher Raymond's girlfriend or ex-wife was a hairstylist, and he's actually the one with the money. And those were conversations that were surfacing around due to who had the most money as to who decided for the children and who looked well fed. But we never really took into context of what this actually does to the children, what this actually does to what's the other parent going through when it is a case of who wins, who loses. Because if you have a short end of it, it literally is just that. I got the short end of it. Versus parenting, I got visits. Because visits sounds different than parenting.
Yeah, it really does, and that's why I said we need to change the whole dialogue to it. It should always be about the children winning. It should never be about whether I win or my son's mother wins. It should always be about, is my son going to win?
So it sounds like we do have a lot of people who are just wanting to figure out how can either they get involved or how can their particular state move forward with the education. And so what are some resources that are out there for fathers or just people like the caller with the grandparents that would like to push more happening within their states? Like, what steps would one have to take?
Yeah, a couple of options. One is the Fathers' Rights Movement, which has a national page, and then each state chapter has their own chapter page. And that's a good starting resource for people who just got thrust into the situation, that have concerns, and sometimes we get literally probably between 1 and 500 private messages a day that we have volunteers answering of usually, as I said, normally fathers who've been thrust into the situation and they're just overwhelmed, don't know what to do. I went ahead and started a new group which works kind of in conjunction with the Fathers' Rights Movement, but mine is geared a little bit more to legislation across the country. So my goal is to try and work with people who are really wanting to get involved with raising awareness to get state legislation passed in their state. And that's called Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. And I've got both a Facebook page for that, if you can look for Americans for Equal Shared Parenting on Facebook, or there is a website. You can either go to AmericansForEqualSharedParenting.com or just the abbreviations, AFESP.com. There is a website on there. And then for my book, I do have a Facebook page called In Case I'm Not Here. And that way people can find out a little bit more about the book. And as I said, my goal is to donate the proceeds of the book to try and help raise awareness for the cause.
And so I like to have conversations where people don't get discouraged by the challenges that may come. And so as you journeyed this journey for some years, what were some of the roadblocks that came up so that fathers can actually look out for those and maybe take alternate routes or just get creative with their approach?
Yeah, and that's one of my passions is because I will never forget how alone I felt at one point, just because, as I said, there's a stigma that you're a man, gut it up and get over it. And you can only keep things inside for so long. And so if any dad is going out, is in that situation, a couple things I recommend. Number one, reach out and find some kind of a church, group, community, club, just something to get yourself around people. What I did was the reverse of what I should have done. I just cut myself off from the world. I would sit in my condo. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to have any interaction with people. And unfortunately, when everything's going against you and you're by yourself, you don't see any hope out there. You've got to stay active. So number one, find some kind of a group to get active with. Number two, connect with either the Fathers' Rights Movement or Americans for Equal Shared Parenting on Facebook. And we try to put out different resources every day to give people ideas and tips. And then for myself, the journal was a good thing, just because in my mind, it helped me project into the future what I wanted to happen. Because as I was always writing that journal, I was always writing it as if I was speaking to my 18-year-old son. I talked about what we did today, but in my mind, I'm picturing my 18-year-old son, and I'm picturing being able to give him these journals. And so I just always kept in my mind, and during the health challenges, it was really tough to stay positive, and we didn't know how things were going to go, so I just pictured making it to his kindergarten. And I pictured what would it be like to be able to show up at his school for the first day of kindergarten. And that was helped me through not just the lack of seeing him, but through the medical challenges that I had, was just trying to picture something positive in the future that was a goal that I just focused so much on.
Okay. So where are you now, Mark, when it comes to how much movement has happened with your involvement with shared parenting with your son today?
Yeah, as of right now, I still only get 6 overnights a month. Now I'm very fortunate. I'm able to have lunch with him every Wednesday. The school he goes to lets parents come in and have lunch if they want. And I haven't missed one yet, to my knowledge, aside from once when I was sick. But every single Wednesday, it's not real convenient. But I drive 25 minutes each way, pick up Chick-fil-A because that's his favorite, either that or Penn Station. And started out saying I would surprise them at school, but since it's been every Wednesday for 2 years now, and this will be the third year, he's starting second grade now. But just something, because the good weeks I get both overnights. I get Friday and Saturday. The off weekends I only get one of them. So he's away from me at least 5, sometimes 6 days continuously during the week, and I just didn't want that long of a break in our bond. So like I said, I've made the effort every single week to get that little 10, 15 minutes worth of time with him at lunch. And I'm really grateful that I have. Like I said, it hasn't always been easy, but it's been so worth it to make sure that we get at least some time together every week during the middle of the week.
It is. That lunchtime is special, and when I go have lunch with my son and all the kids, they all want to sit by me too. So I can imagine that's probably
like a celebrity when I walk in, because all the
right.
kindergarten, first and second grade all have it together, and I feel like Norm on Cheers when I walk in. Mr. Ludwig!
Yeah. It's really cute. It's like, whoa. I feel torn because I'm just like, wait, no other parents are here. And so it does make you feel torn because you're spending that special time with your child just to build those particular memories. And then you're like, wait, there's no other parents here either. And so I get it. So as a mom, as a voice for the community, as a clinician. And so I hear so many countless stories, and I pride myself in just being an advocate, like with taking stands for having sensitive conversations. And I'm going to keep this going until that's it for me. But how can mothers help with getting legislation passed and bringing more awareness to the effects of where the law kind of stands when it comes to 6 days a month and things like that? Like, what do you think we need from our mothers?
Mothers, like I said, I think that's what's really helping to open the door is so many mothers, and whether it's grandmothers, stepmothers, or even mothers that are realizing it. What we're getting a lot of now is mothers who grew up in a household without their father and don't want that for their kids. And so I'm amazed at how many people I've found in my church or people I grew up with that have gotten divorces, and they said, hey, after growing up without my dad, there was no way I was not going to give my ex-husband 50-50. That, I thought it was important for my child to get what I missed out on. But, yeah, mothers, that's the best thing that can help is for more women to stand up and say, hey, it's about the kids. And every study shows that a child growing up without a father is at a huge disadvantage. Now, there are situations, so like I said, I don't want to put people down that are in situations like you're in or situations where a father's passed away or something. There's nothing you can do about that. So I don't mean to alienate people that are in situations like that. But if there is a situation where a father is fit, willing, and able and wants to be involved, man, that really puts that kid at an advantage if you can include the father.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, I wanted to make sure because I believe all of our voices matter, and I'm with you. The more a person has education or has been educated on something, then it now becomes their responsibility to respond. And so I think, like, you can't be blinded by, I don't know anymore. Like, you now have an accountability that's, like, associated with you. So I'm with you. Educate all the way. And so, Mark, as we wrap up, I want to make sure that your information gets out there again. And I know you stated it before, but I would just want to make sure when it comes to, like, how can they get in touch with you? How can they make donations? How can, they support you, get involved in the next movement march? But how can our listeners, like, reach out to you after today?
Yeah, thanks so much. The easiest way is, as I said, I've got both a Facebook page and a website for Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. So the quickest way is the Facebook page, Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. And then you can also go to the abbreviation of that, afesp.com, is a website that you can subscribe to an email that I put out about once a month or so. And then I've also got the Facebook page for the book, In Case I'm Not Here, is the title of that Facebook page. And then always looking for support. There's a lot of expenses that's the only thing holding this book up is I'm not the best writer in the world. I've got the raw material, and I think I've got great information, but I want to put a quality book out, not just, a gimmicky type book. So I'm needing some help with ghostwriting fees and things like that. So if anybody can contribute, there is a GoFundMe page on the Facebook page for In Case I'm Not Here. Or they could also donate through PayPal just by going to info at americansforequalsharedparenting.com, and they could send a direct contribution through PayPal. So it's info at AmericansForEqualSharedParenting.com, and they can use PayPal to make a contribution. I would obviously be very, very grateful because, as I said, I'm really working hard to try and get legislation passed across the country, but it's going to take a lot of money to be able to organize the resources that we need to organize.
And I agree. It really is. Unfortunately, we are driven by finances, and so finances does have a whole lot of talk behind it. But Mark, I definitely want to thank you for just what you do, and I thank you that I am blessed to hear your story from the side in which I'm on as a mom. And
well, thank you, and I really appreciate you taking time out to cover this issue. That really, really does mean a lot.
Thank you so much. And so we will definitely be in touch, and in any kind of way that I can be of support, don't hesitate to actually reach out to me. And so I just want to thank you again for just being a part of my series of Engaging Fathers and Parenting, and just offering your perspective and your side of it. And I wish you the best. And as I continue to break more cycles, then I will definitely have you on as another guest. So thank you so much tonight. And
thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And so Source Nation, that was Mark Ludwig, and he just blew my mind. Like, I was almost over here in tears of just hearing that perspective. And I have to admit, I once shared a negative perspective and overgeneralized of why it looks like fathers are absent. And so this month, just to start, has been a humbling experience for myself. And so I just want to encourage you all next week to continue listening to the series of Engaging Fathers and Parenting as we keep it going with just how to break these cycles and get more parents involved, pass more legislation, and just really co-parent. And so I just want to extend myself out for if anyone has any questions or needing any support. I can be reached via email at jabryant1913@gmail.com, found on Twitter at JaketraB. My website is www.b3mentalperformances.com. And so before I leave, I want to stop and thank our sponsors, and they are Zulina Health, Paper to Film Productions, Revolution Meals, Renovations, Meet My Types Matchmaking, Blend to Blend Juice Bar Boutique, Urban Grandstand Digital, and New Covenant of Praise Worship Center. And please be sure to tune back in next week as I continue the series of Engaging Fathers and Parenting. So I'm your host, Jaketra Bryant. Thank you for listening to Family Mix Mondays.